Welcome everyone to our episode number 8, the magic number. And today we have an honor guest, Quiche Fletcher. We are going to talk about a very asked topic, self-discovery and embracing your purpose. Thank you, Natasha, for co-hosting with me. And of course, it's a pleasure to have you here, Kish. So I'm going to introduce you. Kish is a health coach helping individuals understand the importance of self-care for their overall health. She understands what it is like running on the hamster wheel of life, ending tired, unfulfilled, and unhappy, like I think more than 80% I would dare to say. She draws from her personal journey after following the conventional path of education, employment, and hard work, only to find herself lost and unfulfilled. So that's common also. Through self discovery and embracing her true purpose, Kish has transformed her life into one of happiness, health, and choice. She is now passionate about empowering others to live happy, healthy, and a successful life. Thank you, Kish, for being here. So, my first question, that is the one that I always ask to people because I am interested in their story, is how did you arrive to this journey of health coach?
That's a great question, and I love telling this story. So when I was younger, I always wanted to be a doctor. That was really like the plan I had for myself from the age of 4. So my parents did all the things to help me prepare. I did extra classes, did all the things to prep my resume. Fast forward the tape to college, I had the unique opportunity to job shadow in a hospital. And that doesn't happen very often. And when I did, I got to see lots of things, and it wasn't necessarily like anything gross or bad or anything like that. I really saw how much we are focused on pharmaceuticals, especially here in the States. And that just did not align with me because when I was little, you'd hear me say, I want to fix people, right? Like I wanted to figure out what was wrong with them and make them better because I was going to be a pediatric cardiologist. So at that time, there wasn't a lot of talk about like holistic doctors and things. So I didn't really know much about that. So it probably took me an entire semester to decide like this is not the path I want to take. So took that leap, graduated, and then I like to call that time my identity crisis. I literally had no idea who I was or what I was meant to do because literally from childhood, that's all I worked towards. So I was born and raised in Tennessee, so I ended up moving to Colorado, and that was really where my journey started. I had crazy anxiety and depression, and one of my friends recommended that I start taking yoga classes. And when she recommended that, I was like, I'm not taking yoga. Are you crazy? Like, what's that? You know? And finally, after, she kept pushing me to do it, I'm like, well, it can't hurt from the state that I'm in. So I started, started taking hot yoga classes and absolutely fell in love with it. So love the practice. It helped me to maintain my mental health. And then one of my instructors, after close to a year, kept approaching me, telling me, "You should go through yoga teacher training. You should go through training." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to teach it, because if you know me, I'm like the definition of an introvert." So I was like, "Oh, I definitely don't want to teach." And she's like, "Well, it's really not about teaching; it's about the experience." And I was like, "Well, I don't. No, no thanks." Well, she kept at it, and if you know anything about these trainings, especially at that time, it was like over $3,000, and I was like, "Well, I don't really want to invest in something that I don't really want to do anyway." So when I tell you she did not stop, and I told her, she told me there was a scholarship program. She was like, "Just apply for it." I was like, "If I apply for it, will you leave me alone?" No, we were friends, so I can kind of talk to her that way. But I applied for it and I got it. So I went through the training, and she could not have put that into words how transformative it was. It was the most amazing experience for me and really just helped me to start to understand who I was. And that really kickstarted the journey. So at that time, I really started climbing the corporate ladder because that's what a lot of us do. I got a job, needed to make money, and I'm very hardworking and a go-getter. And so I got promoted very quickly multiple times. So it was that whole, doing all the things. And then I really found myself in a space where I was so unhappy but I couldn't figure out why. It's like one of those things where people ask you, like, I have everything, but why am I unhappy? And so I really hit a point one day, it was 2019, to where I asked myself, what is the point of being here? And if anyone's ever been in a space like that, it's a scary space to be in. And I really just had to kind of sit back and honestly make a decision. And so I really told myself, there's no way we were all put on this earth to work, pay bills, and die. Like that does not make sense to me. So there has to be something more. So I had to start figuring out what I could do to get out of that space. And then a few months later, COVID rolled into town and shut everything down. So that was interesting. And I honestly was very grateful to have my job still because I was essential. However, it was one of those things where I realized I don't have any choices in my life. Like I have to go out into this unknown thing where people are dying and all these different things to make money. So what I did is I started my first coaching business during that time, helping people to manage their stress and anxiety. And that was like a really good thing for me, but it also helped a lot of other people. Towards the end of the year, I decided I don't want to do this job anymore. I put in a leave of absence. I packed all my things, moved back to Tennessee, and then I quit my job. So that put me sort of in panic mode because like my coaching business was okay, but it wasn't bringing in a lot of money. So what I did is I started coaching full time. However, I didn't do it from a place of serving people. It was really to make money. And that did not align with me. And I'm very good with paying attention to that. Like if it doesn't align, I don't want to do it. So I convinced myself, just get another job temporarily until you figure out, what it is that you want to do and build and grow. So temporary turned into 2 years. And I really hit that same wall. And I'm like, why do I keep putting myself back in this space? And so I really had to step back and say, what is it? What's the missing piece that's doing this? Because yes, I don't really want to work for other people, but there has to be something else that's going on. So what I realized is I wasn't doing anything that was fun or anything for me. I wasn't going out with friends. I wasn't like doing any hobbies, nothing. It was like work, work, work. So what I told myself is go do something you enjoy. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to monetize it. It doesn't even have to make sense. So I went and got my personal training certification and my nutrition certification because that's always been an interest of mine. And then I was like, well, why don't you start health coaching? And I started that journey, but for me, I wanted to make it different because I've been that person that's always yo-yo dieted or I lose all this weight and look great. And then like a year later, I'm back in the same spot. So I tried to figure out what is it that's missing from everybody else's health coaching that will help people actually be successful. So I started a sort of mindset piece with it. And so I put together this small little test program just to see what sort of results I would get. And one of my favorite stories from that is a girl was in a similar space to me, unhappy in her life, her job, physical health was poor. At the end of that, she actually got hit all of her goals and she ended up quitting her job, starting her own business. And now she's at the point to where she's needing to hire employees. So like completely thriving. So that big story brings me to where I am today. And it really just helped me to see like, I really want to help people understand that like your health is more than just like the diet and exercise piece. One, and two, just to help them understand that we can control our lives. Like we can design a life that we want. Will it look the way we want it to right away? Probably not. But there's a lot of other internal work and different things that we need to do to be able to get to where we want to go, but it's very possible. So long-winded story about me.
No, that's absolutely beautiful. And so much to unpack there, and well done you for being brave enough to take that leap as well, because it's quite incredible when you do these leaps that people are like, but you have a good job, but you have this ideal life, and what are you doing? And it's really based on their own kind of like limitations and their own fears. So well done you in feeling that and doing it anyway. And I love that you bring into that alignment. You can see I'm on the spiritual, energetic side, is that you feel in alignment with what you're doing. And it's amazing how our physical body gives us a state where it's like, and we're done, time out. It's time to look at something else as well. So I love that you're working through and supporting people in that way, because I think that's going to be happening a lot more often. And I think we need a lot more people to be able to support those that are transitioning into, stepping into their own passion and their own purpose. And yeah, I absolutely agree. If your health and your joy isn't in the middle of everything, then we have nothing. It's like you can have as much money as you like. You can have as like everything, but if you don't have health and joy, nothing else is enough, which is absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing that, which is incredible. I got it. How are you finding? So where is that point, like especially physically, where people reach before they're like, okay, this isn't happening for me? Like, what is that burnout, that stress? What is that makes them go, okay, I need something different? Like, is it something physically that happens, mentally, emotionally? I'd be curious to see the patterns that you're finding when they're like, I need to go see Quiche.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's different for everyone. For me, it was really like my mental health, when it starts to go down, something's off. And I know that now, but just looking back, anytime my mental health was off, that was my body and soul saying, like, this is not it. Please stop. And if you don't stop, I'm going to bring you down. Some people, it's like a chronic sickness, like they get really, really sick. That's their body bringing them down. Sometimes it's people literally going crazy, like just having these moments of like being manic or just being super depressed, or like, I mean, it's really, in my opinion, anything that your body or your emotions are telling you. And a lot of times, especially in the States, we're taught you don't need to process your emotions, just push them down. It's fine. It'll be okay. Just be happy, you know? And if we're not processing those emotions or even just acknowledging that they're there, that's really like the big red flag, or like when you see construction, the big flashing lights and sign that says like road is closed, but we still go through it anyway. And so I think it's really different for everybody. But if you're not feeling like a sense of calm and your emotions aren't on like the more of the positive vibrational side, then something's off and you need to really pay attention to what it is.
Yeah. It's amazing because sometimes people are like, get into a cold, get another cold, get a something else, and that's your body going, hey, slow down. And they're like, okay, we'll just take a couple of pills and then we'll just keep going, we'll keep moving, kind of a thing. I'll sleep next week, I'll sleep next month, I'll finish with this project. I know, because I was there. So I was just like, we'll sleep next month. Like the body just keeps us so resilient until eventually it goes, and you're down.
It's amazing too, because that's what my dad used to say, like, you can sleep when you're dead. And that was like my mindset, because I have a military dad. So it's like I was sort of raised like a boy, because he has two girls. And he thought I was going to be the boy. And then I came out, and not that he was like disappointed, but I just sort of got that. And my mom had to remind him a lot, like, she's a little girl. So like, better be a little girl. So, I mean, I completely get that. It's like, we just push. And it's like, well, I'm going to get there. We're like, well, I'll rest when I get this goal. I'll rest when I do that. And you hit these milestones for whatever you're reaching, whether it's financial or what have you. And then versus you being present and being like, yay, like I hit this milestone, you're like, more. And that's when your body's like, okay, stop. Or, you're pushing for these things and you're not actually putting yourself first while you're doing that. And especially with the nutrition and sleep piece.
Yeah. I so relate to many of those deviations and hitting the wall many times, because has been also my story in many places where I just get bored. First, it starts with getting bored for me. Then it's of course in terms of the mental health, and then I start to feel unfulfilled in what I'm doing. So I'm just asking those questions of what am I doing? I'm not enjoying this. Then my mood starts becoming angrier, like angry with many people. And then the body starts. That has been like the sequence that has been in my life. Whenever I find those walls that I'm doing something that I don't enjoy anymore. And this is so good to be listening with a younger generation like yourself, because I think that as the older generation is speaking now, we were not many times allowed to do that because we were in another, let's say, realm of emotional health, as you mentioned. In those times, you just have to suck it up and swallow, and that's it. That was your life, no? And many times your parents were the first to judge you and to tell you, why are you like this, or why you don't like, or why did you study so hard if you were going to do videos in Facebook?
Yeah.
And I say, well, it's my life. Well, that's the first response, no? It's your life and you are defending. But how do you make those alignment of the complaints of the external noise that everyone questions you or judges you, and the alignment that you want, the alignment that you are trying to find? How do
That's a
you
great question. So when I decided I didn't want to be a doctor, it literally took me an entire semester to not do it because I was scared of what my parents were going to say.
yeah,
And that's like a very like people pleasing type of thing. And in my mind, I was like, they have invested so much time, money, and energy that if I tell them I don't want to do this, like they're gonna like disown me or like yell at me or just all these different things. And then I went to a private school for 3 years. So if you know anything about private schools, like they're very expensive. And my parents paid for my first year. And it was like, okay, here we go. I really don't want to do this. And my parents are very awesome. And as soon as I brought the conversation up, they were like, okay, well, if that's not what you want to do, then what do you want to do was the question. And then their only thing was just finish school. Like that was their only criteria outside of that. So that was like a sigh of relief. So for me, that was like a light bulb moment to say, like, you really need people around you that love and support you. I mean, as long as the morals and values are there for whatever decisions that you're going to make, because a lot of times we get caught up around people that do not have our best interest in mind. And that's when those things come in. Just suck it up. Just do this. Just do that. Like, yeah, my parents like sort of raised me in a way with emotions and different things, but that's what they knew because that's how they were raised. And so that's when you really need to understand to listen to and trust yourself. And that's a big part because there's a lot of times, a very simple example, if you've ever gone somewhere or went to do something and you can't explain it, but there's some feeling and you're like, I don't feel like I should do this or I don't feel like I should go. But a lot of times we're like, oh, it's fine. Or your friends will be like, no, it's just okay. And you do it anyway. And then 9 times out of 10, you go and you're like, I shouldn't have gone to that because of whatever reason. Like that's that voice that you need to start listening to. Now, it's going to be hard if you haven't done it before to make those decisions and like have those conversations. But it's just like anything else. You really have to practice it. But if you're surrounding yourself by what I call your tribe, those people who love and support you, then it makes it a lot easier to be able to transition into just following what you were told by society or what have you, and then truly aligning with yourself and what it is that you're meant to do.
yeah.
Yeah,
How,
absolutely.
well, this follow-up question just came up. Like, how do you find that tribe, or how do you build that tribe? Because nowadays, with, well, first with COVID, that isolated everyone, and then just right before COVID, we were changing already, and we were transforming into a society that is really selfish, I think, or an isolated.
Mhm.
So how do you help yourself in terms of finding the right people?
I think the first thing is like literally what I do is like put yourself first. Like you have to work on this person here. And it's never like I worked on myself for a year, check, I'm done. It's like a constant thing, but once you have sort of the practice in place, like you'll know. But once you start to like understand who you are, and one of the big questions I ask people in the beginning is, what do you want? Because that is a question I had to ask myself in one of the darkest times. It's like, what do you actually want? Like, you know what you've been pushed to do or the path that you've taken, but what do you want? And if you've never asked yourself that question, it's like a profound question because you can probably say a
Mm.
million things that you don't want, but what is it that you tangibly want? So working through that, sometimes it took me months to actually answer that question from my core. And so once you start working on yourself and figure out what it is that you want, you'll start to like see different things. It's like the veil is lifted, right? So you'll see those people who truly aren't supportive or that try to bring you back into that space. And I think what I would say is sometimes it's going to be family. Sometimes it's going to be friends that you've known for a really long time, but boundaries are completely necessary. And if you don't hold those boundaries, you're teaching people how to treat you. And
Mhm.
even if it is your family, and maybe you even live with them sometimes, because that was a circumstance for me. You're going to have to figure out what it is that you have to do to be able to keep that boundary in place. If it's family, even if it's your parents, sometimes, like, you can love them, but you have to be able to distance yourself in a way, if that makes sense. I'm not saying like cut you off, I'm not going to talk to you, but it's really maybe not spending as much time with them. Or I used to, on holidays around certain people, you just know when the time's up. And I'd be like, okay, that's it. Great to see everyone. Goodbye. Like, you don't have to like push through just to spend time with people, but you're just going to have to figure out what boundaries it is that you're going to set to make sure that you and your mental and physical health are okay. And then sort of move forward from there. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I agree with you, because as soon as you start changing that vibrational frequency within and align with what you want, it's very natural for people to fall away, but we have a habit of holding on to those people because we make it mean something, you know. I agree with you, but then it still calls forward that those that are in alignment, because your frequency changes, you start calling forward those people that are in alignment with your frequency, which is pretty awesome. And it's surrounding yourself with the people that you want to become, rather than people that keep you like stuck into past habits that we don't enjoy, as well, as what I found too. I have another question for both of you as medical people. So I'm just putting it out. Do you think that, just going back to what we were saying earlier with regards to that aspect of our parents kind of like sucking it up and moving on constantly? I mean, like, I know that, say, for example, my mom, single parent, growing up in South Africa, it was like quite intense for us as well. And one of her bosses said this, which I found so interesting, said to his wife, he said, you know what? Isabel doesn't have the luxury of being depressed. She doesn't have the luxury of actually going in to a hospital, going in to get treatment because she needs to put food on the table. So, which I was like, yeah, that's interesting. You know, she didn't have an opportunity to do that. But looking at that kind of like habits, so for me now in the generation, because I look at a lot of intergenerational trauma, I look at intergenerational patterns, and it's like you say, the work is never done because we're always discovering a condition that has been placed somehow, that's been unconscious. So with so many generations of sucking it up and needing to move on, and all the traumas that they've experienced and not being able to process, do you think that it is showing, is that why kind of like arthritis is showing up in earlier, diabetes is showing up kind of like in earlier stages in younger people? Or do you think it's based on our nutrition not being as healthy either? Or is it all of these things that in combined together that has us in general being quite unhealthy, overstressed, always burnout, physically unhealthy, mentally, emotionally unhealthy, because like we're all void. I mean, if you look at our children now, it's all about kind of like freaking scrolling, and it's like trying to get them off their technology because everybody's hiding. And do you think these are all symptoms of the generations before not being able to express their emotions or have that physical, mental, emotional freedom to be who they've come here to be?
I think it is a combo of all of that. If you want to ask me, I think one of the big things is the nutrition. Because even if you go back 50 years, which really isn't a long time, like there are thousands of foods that did not exist 50 years ago. And people don't really like pay attention or wrap their minds around that. Like, and I like to take it to the extreme and think about, just say like caveman days. Like, I'm not going to say you have to go back that far, but just think very just simple, primitive. What foods did they have and survive off of? And if you walk into a grocery store and there's other things than that, it's probably not meant to go into our bodies. And a big thing that I teach people on nutrition is literally looking at the label. Skip calories and all that stuff. The ingredients that are in it, if you can't pronounce things in it, don't eat it. Like, just don't do it, because our bodies aren't meant to and don't know how to process those things. Then I think that feeds into sort of what you're saying, like we hold these emotions in the body, and the body sort of has a way of like telling us like, hey, we need to let these things out, and those other issues come up. So paired with the nutrition, it's like it's a nightmare. And then I think also with the screen time, it's like, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I think sometimes those people who have done a little work and realize like our family just either did the best they could or just didn't process these emotions, and they were raised like kind of hard, you know what I mean? Like kind of how we went through, they don't want to raise their kids in that way. So it's very like, do what feels nice or what have you. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be an element of that, but there are hard things we need to do. There's just different ways that I think we can teach them.
Great. And do you think it also works the other way around, when nutrition can activate depression in the body? If we're eating like really bad stuff, changing our mood. And I mean, I know it's like when I'm doing certain work that I do, I have to eat really, really lightly to be able to channel or do whatever it is that I'm doing. So, and I've noticed with food allergies as well, is sometimes kind of like, I have a friend of mine, if she eats something wrong, she has no energy, bad mood, depression, and all her joints swell up. And it's as quickly as that. And it's all food-based. She was like, there was something in there that did not agree with my body, but she hits depression like pretty quickly. And it's, I don't know what's happening. And it's brain fog. It's all of that.
I completely agree with that, because that's me. And I've just recently started to pay attention to it. If I eat a lot of, and I'm not saying those things that I just said, like with the ingredients, like don't eat it. Yeah. Do I eat some stuff I shouldn't? Yes. I mean, that's kind of what you know what I mean? You're raised on some of the stuff, and then sometimes we just want yummy things. But I find myself eating, because I live in the South, we fry pretty much everything. If I find myself eating like lots of fried things, like French fries are my nemesis. I love a good French fry, but if I find myself eating a lot of fried things or chips, or like, those are my go-to, anything like that, my mood is just like funky. And before I realized it was my diet, it was kind of like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm exercising, like things are good, I feel like aligned, but I'm just like off. And I would have to really pay attention. Like, what are you fueling your body? Because like I said before, like our bodies don't know how to process French fries and potato chips. So it's like, what nutrients are going to your brain? Because what happens like when your body's digesting, that's like the most energy that your body uses. And when it's going through that process, it's supposed to go through and take out all of these wonderful nutrients and just spread it all over your body so that you can do the things you need to do. But when we feed it crap, it's like, okay, I'm doing all this hard work, but like, what do I do with this, or where do I put it? And then you have like fat stores, or you have like flare-ups, because I have food allergies. Like you have all these different things, and your body is literally saying like, okay, like what you just ate, I'm going to make you pay attention. Like, I'm going to make your arthritis flare up. That's for me. When I have gluten, it is like a whole thing, like these big things. And I would push through sometimes. Like, I know my body's saying stuff, and I'm like, but bread, it's so good, I'm going to eat this, right? And then I would like take it out of my diet and feel better. And I'm like, I can have it this one time. And my body's literally like, oh my gosh, like, please stop doing this. So yeah, I completely think your diet is like a big thing. And so that's why when I work with people, that's the thing I start with. It's your diet and your exercise, because if you don't have that piece, nothing else is going to stay aligned. You might line up, but it's not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So I found this really cool app. I don't get anything from it, but it's called Yuka. And now you find me going into the supermarkets, and it scans the barcode, and it gives you a rating out of 100, how good that food is. And if it said rates it below 50, it gives you like an orange or a red. And it'll tell you what that red or that orange is and what percentage it is. And if you click on it, it'll tell you why it's not great for you. So it'll give you the name that you can't pronounce, and it'll tell you what it is and what it could cause. So it doesn't recommend. And I was in the super, but it not only does it for food, but it does it for your shampoos, and it does it for your toothpaste, because I was like, oh, we're observed. we're absorbing so much through our skin, especially, I mean, the soles of our feet. If we look at reflexology, it represents every organ in our body, and we're absorbing these chemicals, like walking barefoot on the floor that you've just kind of like jicked all over the place. And I was like, oh my goodness, this realization that was coming in. So now you see me at the stores, like bar scanning everything, and it's incredible. Like, just even toothpaste. So I was looking at a brand of toothpaste, and it'll have one with mint and one with whatever, whitening or whatever. And the one will be kind of like 79 out of 100, and the other one will be like 32. It's the same brand. And I was like, oh my goodness, we are getting poisoned in so many ways that we didn't even know about, right? Even shampoo as well. So it's quite interesting how all these chemicals are really starting to affect our biology in so many ways.
No, the chemicals too, I think, is like a big thing people don't pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like once people get their diet and exercise on track, it's so funny because I'll always tell you, I'll say, I love you very much, but here's the next thing. And people are like, it never ends. No, it doesn't. But the more we know, the better we can do. And it's like people forget that your skin is an organ and that it is very like permeable. Like things go through there all the time, like lotions and different things. So a lot of times, like if it's not summertime, I use like oils. It's very natural things like to try and put on because like if you look at your lotion bottle, there's mad things in there that's like, what is this? And like for years, like you just don't pay attention. It's like, oh, lotion makes my skin feel and look good. So it's like on top of terrible nutrition, your body's trying to use, then your body's also trying to use the nutrients that you're not giving it to get rid of all the chemicals that you're putting in too. So I think that was a great point to bring up.
Yeah. And talking about the French fries and all of those foods and things, I think one ingredient that I think it's worth mentioning because it's worth that people pay more attention is the trans fats. All those trans fats that they are just labeled like that are the ones that are going to help the other ones build up and start creating this machinery that is against you, that is like a sponge of toxins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people start feeling foggy or cranky or any kind of mental unbalance, because that's what these trans fats do. We cannot process them because we don't have the enzymes to break them down. So that's just what I used to explain to my students in biochemistry because they were telling me, well, what is this going to help me for? And I said, well, just picture your French fries and how many ingredients. And I just label those fatty acids and those things, those chemicals, and I explain them how they can be breaking down by us because we don't have those enzymes. Not even an animal, not even any human living being has those enzymes. So that is just something that the industry is just, of course, making money out of it because they also create that craving need to consume more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where when you start into a cycle of never ending feeding up with toxic food, no? And
It's
that
like addiction. It's truly an addiction because like if people don't understand, like, and this used to be me. I'm like, why can I not stop eating this? Like I have a great like willpower, like I can do anything, but it's like some foods I'm like, I don't know why I keep going back to this. And when I start looking into that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like some of the additives are truly like addicting, like more so than like some like typical drugs like people talk about, like, and it's in our food. And so it's very interesting you bring that up about the oils, is because I was like researching something about it because oils are more prevalent. And I was like talking to someone about like, you know, they're like, oh, use olive oil and these different things. But in the quantity that we have it out and that people use it, there is no way there are enough trees out there for whatever oil that you're using to be able to produce enough to do this. So obviously they're synthetic. They have to be. So vegetable oils, if you look at it, it's like, oh, this seems pretty healthy, no trans fat, all of this stuff. Well, I fried something one day, and this is kind of me experimenting. And when you fry, like it kind of goes out of the pan and it's around the stove. Well, I kind of let just a little rundown or whatnot, left the pan there, let it cool. The bottom of the pan is sticky.
Yeah.
So that just lets you know there's probably like a lot of things in there. I personally think there's plastic in everything. So there's that, but there's a lot to that. I say that to say, but it's like the oils, like pay attention, even if you're like, oh well, I use this oil, that oil. I don't, and it's not even like the oil it used to be. So
Yeah.
we shouldn't really be consuming that. And you just go back again, caveman days. Did they have this vegetable oil? No, they used either fats from animals or nothing at all. So
I went into a trip like I think it was 10 years ago or something like that when I was in the pharma industry. And I went to Korea, to Seoul, and they the way they ate, it was just amazing for me because the food tasted different and the food was very clean. I mean, they just eat fruits, vegetables, and meat, raw meat. Well, raw meat in terms of frying it, but without any oil, and
yeah.
just the same fat of the meat could serve to cook the vegetables or the other things if it was a fried dish, no? And I went into the warehouse where they had all the drugs and the vaccines and things. And in that place, there is a meal. I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but a meal place where all the employees eat. And the way they eat is that they give you the pan and they give you the ingredients and you cook it by yourself and you eat it there. So
I love that.
I saw that girl cooking the Korean girl what I went with whom I went with, and I was amazed of all the fat that came out of a piece of meat that served to cook any other thing that you would want. And when I ate, I was satisfied without so much food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you saw the quantity, you say, this is no way I'm going to get satiated with that. But when you ate it and it was just clean food,
Mm-hmm.
you were fine. You were not hungry and you could last hours without having another meal. So that's what happens with real food, no?
Yeah, I love this conversation. It's like, so I was just talking to someone, all the processed things that we eat are very like once we chew them up and swallow them, like especially like wheat, it's very gummy. So if you notice like a piece of bread, about, this big, right? Chew it up, it goes into like this gummy little mixture, and when it goes into your belly, that's about the size that it is. So you have to eat a lot of that for the level of food in your belly to fill up for your stomach to release the hormones to tell you I'm satiated. And that's a big thing. And like you said, David, it's like if you're eating whole foods that are good for you, those take up so much more space in your belly so that you don't need as much. And then your belly will be like, okay, you're satiated. And that's like a big thing too. It's like, and I tell people in the beginning, I don't like for people to do elimination diets because like that's all you're going to think about. I can't have, I can't have, I can't have. And then you're going to go back and binge on those things. But what I do tell people is you need to start incorporating more fruits and veggies. And then I tell them, eat them first and then put the other stuff on top and you won't eat as much. So like that, I love that. That's a great point.
Yeah. That's what happens because all those vegetables are going to soak up water and you're going to feel satiated just by what is happening, no?
Mm-hmm.
With the food. Yeah.
It.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
And then
amazing.
keeping your stress down too. That's like a big
Mhm.
thing. I stress eat.
Mm.
That's like one of the big things I have to pay attention to. And people who do that, you really have to like be cognizant of it. I
Mhm.
caught myself one day just I don't even know what it was, just eating. And I'm like, what? Like, why am I eating right now? Like, I literally just had lunch. I'm not hungry. Like, what is it that I'm doing? So if you find yourself doing that, you really need to take a step back and ask yourself, like, what is going on? Like, what's going on in your life, what your emotions are, different things, because that's when, with these additives and different things in foods, that'll help you to understand, like, hey, something else is happening because I'm reaching for this and I've done just fine without it for a long time. And that's another signal that your body will use if you're not listening to something else that it's giving you. Because we have a way of just being like I said, like, oh, I'm kind of sad today. That's fine. Just you're okay, but your body's like, no, like, I need you to pay attention to this thing. But just paying attention to those other little signals too will help you to start to, be aware of what's going on.
So that's very interesting. My mom went through a stage where she used to crunch ice all the time. And I'm like, she was like, what am I doing? And I'm like, you should go check that out. And there was a doctor who said to her, you're lacking iron.
Yes, it's iron.
And then she started taking iron tablets and she was like, no more crunching ice. It's amazing how your body just like knows these things. But the other thing that it's not only about consuming our food, but I've also started noticing it's what we consume in our mind, the books that we read, the Netflix and chill. Like the other day, I think my daughters are into horror movies right now. I don't know if it's a teenage thing. And I was like, watch the first 5 minutes. And I was literally like this. And I'm like, this is not chill time. This is stressful. I'm like, I'm not watching this. I was like, put in a comment, but I was literally like, I'm like, this is not relaxing. I mean, I'm probably putting my body through quite a lot of strain right now, but it's like, no. So it's true. It's like, what are we eating? What are we thinking? What are we, consuming in all levels, I think is important to notice as well. And like, for example, so when I started realizing, looking at affirmations and reprogramming our minds and our subconscious, and I had picked up this really bad habit when I was pregnant, where I was so tired that I'd fall asleep on the couch, like that little bit of like, it was like deep kind of like sleep. And then I woke up one day and I was like, oh, what are we watching? What have we just programmed into my subconscious mind? Kind of a thing. I was like, what are the messages that are happening in the back here? So I don't watch too much TV, but when I do now, I'm very conscious of what I put into my brain, what I consume that way, because it affects your mood and it affects everything else around you as well, which I find quite interesting too.
I love that you said that, because that was when I started shifting my life. I still am, but like a big music person, and I love horror movies, and I love just like, I was sort of in the acting world for a while, so I would just watch all kinds of things because that was like my job. And when I sort of started working on myself, I noticed someone asked me like, have you seen this movie? And I'm like, I've never even heard of that movie. And they're like, well, it came out like 3 years ago. And I'm like, huh. It's because I'm so focused and putting other things in. And like, even when I went back to like listening to music a little more and different things, like some of the stuff that I had in my playlist and stuff, I was like, I don't want that. Like I don't like it. So I would take it out and sort of change that. And now when I watch shows, like I'm a big like action movie person. And of course there's like violence and stuff in there. But I think at this point, my mind doesn't really like pay attention to that point. It's like, I always tell myself I'm my own superhero. So I think like in action movies like those people, so they interest me. So like that helps me like, hey, that would be cool to be able to have. I love having different skill sets. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in this action movie, they do this. Maybe I should work on this. And so it's very like motivating to me, as weird as that sounds. But like in the past, it would be like me absorbing, like you said, like all the violence and all the different things and wonder why I'm angry and want to like punch people in the face. And it's like, well, it's because that's what you're putting in. That's like what you're intaking. So the things I read, the things I listen to, there's lots of times like my friends will ride with me in the car or something and I have nothing on. Like it's just nice, like sitting and resetting. And like I'm big into like meditation and teaching people what meditation is not, because there's a huge misconception about it. So just really just being with yourself. Like I like to think of your brain as a computer, and sometimes you need to restart your computer, right? Just a lot going on. And I tell people there's so much input that we get. there's the different type of lights, there's your TV, there's your phone, there's the billboards, you got to pay attention to traffic, you got kids in the back, like there's all day long you have input. So if you're not taking time to just sit and let your brain sift through everything that it's like intaking, like you wonder why you lay in bed at night. And I have insomnia issues. That's gotten way better since I started doing this, because then you lay down at night and you're like, I'm so tired, I'm ready to go to sleep. And then your brain's like, blah. And it's because it hasn't had time all day to just sift through and file those things. So I just tell people too, sometimes like just being with yourself in silence, like is amazing. And then if you're like pushing away from that because you're like, oh, well, I have these certain thoughts, it's time to deal with those thoughts. Like, don't push them away, because they're going to come back in some form or fashion, like we talked about in the beginning, maybe in your body. Maybe you're going to have, I literally had a mental breakdown. I blacked out in a parking lot at one point and woke up in my house. And I was like, oh, what happened? And had been there for like a day or two. Had no idea. So pushing those things down, like we said, it's going to come back in some form or fashion. It's your body is going to knock you down, and it's going to look different for everyone. But like, it's really just being able to be with yourself and to start to understand what yourself is telling you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's so pervasive. All of those things that we are consuming in with the ears, with the eyes, with your senses, and that your digestion changes. And if your digestion change, you don't absorb also the nutrients. We were discussing that in our previous episode about this digestion time and the things that happen with the microbiota and your gut health and those things. And all of that stress that you are creating by watching something that while you are eating or throughout the day, and as you mentioned, you bottle up and it has to come out at some point. Well, turns out that many times it comes out when you are eating, and many times it comes out when you are going to sleep. And then what happens is that what you mentioned, people are not having good quality of sleep or not being able to sleep at all. And then they wake up and they have anxiety and they have craving for sweet foods or processed food. And that's the ending, well, another cycle that they get into, no? So it's so, our bodies are so wise and we are just very, very stubborn to make it harder and to make it more complex. But our body says, well, you don't like this, you are being stressed, get out from this. No, and just turn off the TV or turn off whatever you are listening. But you don't pay attention, of course. You are intrigued by what is happening, or many times pushed by other people, no?
That's what I was going to say. You're either intrigued or you're like, well, my friends are keeping up with this show, so I have to watch this show. Or like a society thing. And I hate to bring this show up, but a lot of people like get sucked into like the Kardashian show. And that was like a big thing for people. And one of my friends is like die hard, like knows all about this and stuff. And I have no clue. I don't watch that kind of stuff. That just doesn't interest me, because I'm like, how does this help me? But I think a lot of people get sucked in because of that. No, like, and then sometimes they're like, I don't really want to watch this, or they're just like halfway doing it. And it's just getting in that societal sort of thing, I think, on that kind of stuff. So this is a conversation that can go on all day long.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that statement. Like, it's you really, or it's you are trying to, it's like self-medicating. Right? Like, my mind is thinking about this, I'm just going to turn on the show so I don't think about it, type thing. So,
yeah. Actually, talking about self-medicating as well, like I have clients that find it hard to cry. So I'm like, watch a sad movie. Cry for the movie and cry for everything else you haven't cried for before, and you can use it in a different way. If you need to laugh, watch a comedy, like that's also a release. But it was just like, yeah, so you're right. It is medication somewhere in there as well. So it's using it how you want to use it. Usually it's kind of like animal movies, like dogs and things like that like I'm like, oh my God. Actually, I cry really easily now. I never used to, but yeah. So it is like, yeah, cry for that and cry for everything else you hadn't cried for before, which is pretty cool.
I wish that trick worked for me. I don't.
Doesn't it work?
It
Okay, I'm
doesn't.
gonna have to send you a bunch of sad movies.
I cried at legit 2 movies of my life.
Okay.
Two. So one of them, I think, looking back, like it was. I mean, I'm very empathetic. So when other people cry, like I want to make them feel better because like I'll start to feel it coming up for me. So like 10 Things I Hate About You, like that older movie, like when she's reading the poem, she cried. I like bought. It was like I don't know, 10, 12 or something. And then when I was done, I was like, why am I crying at this movie? And then another one is one of my favorite movies is The Notebook. And I don't know what it was at the time, but I did. And it's like the crying piece for me is like kind of how I was raised with my dad, like shut it off. It's kind of like I said, I was raised like a boy, like boys don't cry. Shut that down, you know? And I remember like my grandmother passed away, and this is like an extreme story, but it's true. I'm literally like they're burying her, and I'm like having a moment where I'm like hysterically crying, and my dad like pulls me up and was like, "Stop crying." And so that was a big emotion that I pushed down. And I like now I know he didn't mean it in a malicious way. Like it wasn't anything like that. That's just how he was taught to process or not that emotion. And I remember I was like 18 at the time. So that kind of started that journey of like having all these different things happen with anxiety and depression. It's because that emotion I never really processed. And I remember thinking about my grandmother one day when I was doing some inner work, and I cried for like a whole day. And that was truly the first time that I truly grieved. And then after that, it was kind of like I went into a state of guilt because I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like this is kind of weird to say, but I feel better. You know what I mean? Like I'm sort of moving on, but then I'm like, oh, well, shouldn't I still be sad over my grandmother? Like it was like this whole thing, but I think that's just from years of like pushing all of these emotions down. But crying is still something that I have to be completely broken down for it to happen. And it happens more now, but it's still not enough. And I know that.
Yeah, I was told crying doesn't fix anything. What's the point of it? Meanwhile, it's a chemical reaction that your body's actually doing to release
no, but it actually
we're holding on to, but it actually does, right? Yeah, yeah.
I such agree with all these conversations and that for me children's movie always makes me cry.
That as well.
All the children's movies are amazing and they have a lot of messages that I think that are just dedicated to any kind of age and mostly for older people than rather than children because sometimes they don't even pick them up or they don't understand them yet. But you as an adult, when you watch those movies, you really cry a lot and you really relate to many of the messages because you say, this is what we were supposed to do or how we should be acting or whatever it is, no? And I love that kind of therapy, let's call it, like watching therapy. And I use it also to laugh because I like to eat and laugh. So when I am eating, I like to watch things that make me feel good in terms of laughing or just dumb things that distract my mind a little bit from the other things. And I think that that's also something that people can relate. And there are so many emotions that have been holding on since the pandemic because many people grieve. A lot of people that went to the other side in during the pandemic and they haven't been able to cope with that. And that I think that's one of the major issues in terms of the depression, in terms of the anxiety, loneliness, and all of this is going to be translated, of course, into food issues or health issues. No?
Yeah, that's one of the things that people could reach for. You know, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't, you know what I mean? Like do any of those things. So it's like, but food, it's right here. It's accessible. So I think a lot of people reached for that. And that's why you hear these jokes and stuff where people are like, it's like the freshman 15, like when you go to college and they talk about the COVID 20 or whatever it is. But that was so true for a lot of people because it's like, even people who worked out, a lot of times, if you weren't doing home workouts, like you couldn't go to the gym. You couldn't do any of the things. So like I think that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have covered plenty of information, and I think we can go on, of course, for more. So I am announcing that we are going to make a part two of this conversation. So,
Yay.
if you are up to Kish, of course.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, what can you just tell the audience in terms of how do you help them to self-discover and to find their own purpose? Just to wrap this.
Yeah, just make sure you're putting yourself first. There's going to be some
Mhm.
type of guilt, or you're going to think that you're
Yeah.
being selfish or what have you if you haven't done this just yet. But just know it's important for you to do anything else. It's like you can't pour from an empty cup, so you have to fill your cup. And the first way I would do that is make sure that you're eating more fruits and veggies. You don't necessarily have to cut anything else out, just eat more fruits and veggies, and then make sure you're moving your body. I think a lot of people have an aversion to like exercise. They think you have to go to a gym and do this and that. Just move your body. If you're completely sedentary now, going for a daily walk, do a couple push-ups. Even if you're like, man, I could barely do that push-up, great. Just do the ones you can do and you can add to it. But putting yourself first, making sure that you're feeling your body in a proper way, and everything else will start to line up from there.
Yeah. I think that could be
Beautiful.
a good segue for the second part, the exercise and the meditation part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Beautiful. Thank you
thank
so much. It was so lovely to meet you. It's wonderful. How do people find you?
Instagram, The Confidence Maker. That's my
you.
business name, theconfidencemaker.com. That's being updated, but that's my website, or Quiche Fletcher on Facebook.
Perfect. I
Beautiful.
will
Thank
also
you.
put it in the caption, in the description of the video, and the links, of course. Thank you,
Thank you
Kish.
so much.
So we are going to be eager for the second part.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone, for listening,
Goodbye,
and
everyone.
we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.